All right, good evening. Welcome to MUFON Los Angeles. My name is Steve Murillo. I'm the State Section Director for MUFON LA. We are very proud to present David Jacobs. Dr. David Jacobs, PhD, is an Associate Professor of History at Temple University, and he specializes in 20th century American history and culture. Dr. Jacobs began his research in the controversy of unidentified flying objects in America in the mid-1960s. So he's been doing this for quite a while, and he has amassed over 38 years of primary research data and analytical hypotheses on the subject. In 1973, Dr. Jacobs completed his doctoral dissertation in the field of intellectual history at the University of Wisconsin-Madison on the controversy over unidentified flying objects in America. This was only the second PhD granted involving UFO-related themes. A revised version of his dissertation was published by Indiana University Press as the UFO Controversy in America in 1975, and it remains the first sympathetic book on the subject of the existence of UFOs to be published by an academic press. For over 25 years, Dr. Jacobs has offered the only regular curriculum university course on UFOs entitled UFOs and American Society. Since 1973, Dr. Jacobs has continued to devote most of his professional and personal energies to researching the UFO phenomena in general and the abduction phenomena in particular. Having conducted nearly 900 hypnotic regressions with over 140 abductees, Dr. Jacobs is one of the foremost UFO abduction researchers worldwide, so we're very pleased to have him tonight. As a result of his extensive primary research, he has developed the first scientific typology of the UFO abduction experience. Dr. Jacobs has written and delivered many articles, papers, and addresses on the subject of UFO abduction and has been a consultant to the major UFO organizations. In 1992, Dr. Jacobs' second book, The Secret Life, First-Hand Accounts of UFO Abduction, was published by Simon & Schuster. The book is the most complete exposition of the structure and meaning of the abduction phenomenon yet published. The Threat, which is available in the back of the room, was published by Simon & Schuster in January of 1998. The book addresses important questions about abduction and clarifies issues that have been the subject of much speculation for the past 50 years. The Threat presents first evidence-driven hypotheses that provides a falsifiable solution to the UFO mystery. In 2000, Dr. Jacobs published the edited book UFOs and Abduction, Challenging the Borders of Knowledge, with 10 expert authors writing about UFOs and the abduction phenomenon, with the academic community as the target of the audience. This book is one of the few about abductions and UFOs ever published by an academic press. In addition, Dr. Jacobs has lectured on the subject of UFO abduction at universities and colleges all across the country, and in 1989 he delivered the first paper to a scientific organization about the abduction phenomenon at Cornell University. In 1992, Dr. Jacobs participated in the first session on UFOs at the History of Science Society in Washington, D.C. In conjunction with colleague Bud Hopkins, Dr. Jacobs conducted the widely discussed Roper Organization poll of the abduction phenomenon, and I'm sure he'll talk about that tonight. The results of that highly influential survey were published in 1992 in the booklet Unusual Personal Experiences. Finally, Dr. Jacobs is a strong advocate of strict scientific and ethical research methodology. With colleagues Bud Hopkins and John Carpenter, he has given a series of workshops for members of the mental health community in the methods of abduction, hypnosis, research, and therapy. In recent years, he's concentrated on ascertaining the proper methodological techniques for the hypothesis of and therapy of abductees. Hopkins and Jacobs revised suggestions for hypnosis and therapy of abductees was originally published in 1994. At present, Dr. Jacobs is currently working on a book about the methodology of hypnosis of abductees. With that said, would you please put your hands together and give a warm welcome to Dr. David Jacobs.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Steve. And it was even more important to me because I wrote it. So. But be that as it may, I've come to say very crazy things tonight. I've come to talk about not the abduction phenomenon. I've talked that to death already. What I'm going to talk about is sort of some things happening in the abduction phenomenon. I brought some slides with me. I'll dispense with them. I'll show them very quickly, and then I'll get into what I want to talk about. But I figured you'd want to see some slides anyway. I want to thank, incidentally, MUFON LA and MUFON Orange County for sponsoring me to come out, because it's from Philadelphia where I live, and it's a long trip. And Steve Murillo in particular, and Jamie Hunter, and everybody else who made it possible. Well, the abduction phenomenon is something that it's unusual. Let's just say that. It's not something that I ever expected to be interested in when I first started out working in this subject. Oh, thank you. It's not something that I ever dreamed that I would spend most of my life after 1981 looking at. And what I found was even less reliable, less of something that I thought I would find when I began to research this subject. Now, I'm assuming that everybody here pretty much knows that abductions, people say that they're being abducted, and they talk about what it is that is happening to them, and they know that people are taken on board an object, and everybody knows, I am assuming, that there's an examination. You know, people are put on a table, they're closed room, they're put on a table, and this has happened to them, and that happens to them, and this happens to them, and that happens to them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If nobody has heard of that, I would be surprised. That's all over the place. And for a long time, we concentrated on what I just said. In other words, we had for us a model, and it was the model of Barney and Betty Hill. This is a case that happened in 1961, and it came to public attention in 1966. And there were a couple who were traveling through New Hampshire on their way to Portsmouth late at night. Their car was stopped. They were taken on board an object. They were given physical examinations and released. And our assumption then was, yes, that makes some sort of sense, because if we were to do that on another planet, and if what they are saying was not just some sort of figment of their imagination or whatever, that's what, you know, that fit a sort of model of study, experiment, a learning situation. You find somebody, you say, there's one, get him. You grab him, you pull his legs off, you see what's inside. Hey, that's what you do. The model is the experiment. And this is a model that I used and that I labored under. And all researchers use that model. And if you read Secret Life, in the back of my mind, I still have that model in the book. The evidence did not hold for that. We could not sustain the evidence for that. The evidence just plain wasn't there. Now we have learned that, and when I say we, you have to understand I'm using the royal we. Oftentimes, I mean I. And so you'll have to just take that for what it's worth. But what we've learned is that an examination of a person is never the reason for an abduction. How's that? It's not just that it's something that happens all the time. It's never there's always some other reason for an abduction. It might take place during what we think is an examination phase, but it's not the reason. And when we looked at this phenomenon more and more, we began to understand that this simply was not an experiment. It wasn't a learning situation. They weren't trying to find out what makes us tick. This was a program. There was an assembly line kind of quality to it. There was a situation where they were just getting people in, doing whatever they were going to do to them, and then getting them out, one after another, over and over and over and over and over again, all night, all day, all through the United States, all through Western Europe, all through Latin America, and probably in every other major country in the world too, although I can't guarantee that. Well, as a program, that means that it has a beginning, we would assume, a middle, and an end, because a program generally is goal-directed. In other words, there is a reason why they're doing it. And so when I wrote The Threat, I wrote about the program involved with this phenomenon. And rather than going through all the aspects of the abduction phenomenon, what I want to talk about is sort of the reproductive aspects of it to a degree. Now, not totally and completely, but to a degree. And so what we'll do is take a look at some of what happens during typical abductions. And what I want to do is move forward. Move forward is move forward. I want to move forward. There we go. And we know that women say routinely that eggs are extracted from them, that this is something that is common. It's common for every woman who has ovaries intact. We don't really see a whole lot of exceptions to that. I'm sure there are exceptions to it, but it's extremely common. And harvesting eggs. All of these are drawings by abductees. What I want you to look at here also is, you'll notice in this room, it's a circular room, and there are archways. You'll notice that there's no doors. They're not squared off. These are tables. You notice that they just sort of come right down. Now, what they've done here is they've made an edge to the table. And when you ask them about this edge, there really isn't one most of the time. It's just part of the floor as they describe it. And that's what she's laying on here as well. And here are our old friends, standard gray aliens. And I just want you to keep this sort of table in mind, and as you'll see as we go along. Next. Forward. There we go. Is this number 2? I guess so. Here is a sperm collection procedure. Here's a guy who's laying on one of these tables. You'll notice a curved room and a round. And this is a situation where sperm is being taken and he is comforted by an abductee, a non-alien, an abductee, which I found of no concern whatsoever when I saw this and when he told me about it. Later, I became interested in this. So they take sperm, we know that, all the time. In fact, Barney Hill in 1961 said that they had taken a sperm sample, but when a book was written about them in 1966, to our amazing luck, he refused to have that put in because it was so embarrassing. He didn't want people to know. And that was hugely important to us because nobody knew that this had happened to Barney, and people started describing it all the time, then nobody could be accused of picking it up from the Barney and Betty Hill story early on. You see what I mean? It wasn't mentioned, but it's in the testimony. Here is sperm extraction with neural engagement. One of the things that I discovered was, this is a totally different person. You'll notice that the same kind of table. And one of the things that I discovered was this oddity of neural engagement. I'm going to walk away from the podium, if that's okay. And the oddity is, I was doing a session with a person once, and she says, she had flown with angels, and I think I talk about this a little bit in one of those books. And I wanted to take a look and see what had happened, and it was very difficult. And finally, she realizes that the angel she was looking at is not an angel at all. He's an angel, but he's small, he's gray, he's thin, he's bald. That's the angel, you know. And so they take her on board this object. This is her, that to her, this to her, that to her. And I come across a situation where they give her a piece of paper, she says. Whether this is true or not, I'm not sure. And I said, well, what's on the paper? She says, a series of boys' names. I'm supposed to memorize the names. I said, okay. Having never heard anything like this before, and this is like 1988, And I'd only started doing my own hypnosis in '86, so I still had no idea. Nobody knew anything about this phenomenon, really. I mean, even my colleague Bud Hopkins and I were still very much in the dark about what was going on. And so I said, are you memorizing the names? She said, no. I said, well, what are you doing? Well, I'm sort of looking around a little bit, although she wasn't looking around, whatever. Then I was just stumped. What do I ask next? She's standing there. She's not doing what she's supposed to be doing. So I had no idea what question. So I came up with a question. The question was, well, what is this guy who brought you into the room, this alien, what is he doing? Oh, she said, he's looking at me. I said, okay, well, where is he looking? You know, he's looking at my eyes. I said, well, how close is he to you? And she said, well, he's right there. He's a couple inches away, right on the side. Which was not the answer that I expected. I mean, obviously they're going to be looking at her. I mean, they don't want her to start running down the hallway or whatever it is. I mean, they're obviously going to be looking at her. So, it was so surprising. I couldn't imagine what was happening here or why this was happening. So I started to ask, when this came up, I began to ask people who were lying on a table, well, what's he doing now? And then they'll say, well, he's looking at me. And then you come to the standard leading them away questions. Well, is he looking at your foot, you mean? Is he looking at your knees? Or, well, is he, no, he's looking at my head. Well, is he looking at your chin, your ear? These are direct, misleading questions. And no, he's looking at my eyes. Well, how close is he to you? Oh, his forehead is touching mine, or he's an inch away or something like that. Sort of like what you see here. And the question is, what in the hell is this? What does this mean? How do you deal with this, huh? Now, everybody is saying that. I learned you just have to ask the proper questions and out it comes every time. I mean, now where I'm dealing with this, it quickly gets to like I've got 10 instances of it, 20 instances, and then the next thing you know, I've got 700 instances of it or more. I've looked at 1,100 different abduction events. And it's just a normal feature of this phenomenon. And my sense was, ultimately, is that they're hooking into the optic nerve. And there's a lot of reason to think that they're doing this. And because the optic nerve is the only nerve that you can see from the outside. You can see it in the back of your retina. And it goes directly to the brain. And they can use it as a conduit to innervate whatever other neurological sites that they have in their mind. So people will describe them sort of images coming up that they can describe. The people will say, well, I'll say, well, the key question here is, well, what's going on in your mind, which is something I stumbled on later on. What's going on in your mind while this is happening? And they'll say, well, there's sexual response going on, which leads to egg-taking procedures or sperm-taking procedures. They're looking at memories that happened to me, things that happened to me in the last couple of weeks. Or I'm seeing a comb, I'm seeing a table leg, I'm seeing a shoe, I'm seeing a tree, I'm seeing a walnut, I'm seeing a ballpoint pen, or whatever, and you know that they're just going through these neural pathways, and you get these flashes of images that are just going right into. And I used to think that there was some significance to this, that I was trying to put the pieces together. What does all this mean? What are they looking at? And the answer is nothing. It doesn't mean anything. It just means that you can see them going through the neural pathways, firing these images off, looking for a specific site. And that's sort of what's happening here. Now, it's important to sort of remember this. This is a sperm collection procedure. Here's guys on the standard table. This is a machine that has a hose attached to it right here. I did not bring in my other drawings of this same machine. I have them. When an egg, sometimes an embryo is extracted from a woman. First, an embryo is placed in a woman. I'm getting ahead of myself here a little bit. And all I know is that they feel pregnant one time. Now, feeling pregnant and going through a certain procedure which leads to pregnancy are two different things. One can go through that procedure which leads to pregnancy with your boyfriend, let's just say, and feeling pregnant makes sense. Feeling pregnant just because you feel pregnant means you're not pregnant, because something has to happen first, see? But as we all know here, if you know anything about the abduction phenomenon, these people are pregnant. And they think to themselves, what in the hell, how could this possibly be happening? You know, what do you mean, pregnant? They can't be pregnant. And then after about 10 weeks, you get a little embryo removal procedure, and suddenly, false alarm, they weren't pregnant after all. Never mind. This is extremely important, as we will see. Now people are taken into rooms, and they're shown fetuses that have been removed from them. Not from each individual, obviously, but from various abductees in different stages of development, although you can't quite tell from here, although some of these look smaller than ones over here, for example. This is one room. I called it an incubatorium, and I was overly proud of myself for inventing this term. And then I looked it up one day, and it's an old word. It's already been invented by somebody. And deflation was me. Then here's another one. These are in sort of tubular structures, all suspended in liquid. See a small one here and larger ones here, a tiny one there, and so forth, from a different person altogether. Notice the arches and all that. Now, sometimes, and Bud Hopkins first discovered this, and a lot of other things that we're talking about. What you have is a baby that's sort of grown up and looks like a strange sort of combination of alien and human. And once again, I've written about this extensively in my books. And one of the ones that looks more alien than anything else is usually a caretaker who presents a baby to a woman or to a man. And if it's a woman, she might have to hold the baby, she might have to feed the baby, she might have to touch the baby. If it's a man, he does the same thing except for feeding the baby, obviously. And here's sort of where they sit to nurse. And you'll notice that the seat here is just against the wall. Actually, this is built into the wall. It's like a ledge, as people describe it, in this circular room. Now, you see what she's wearing there? This is what I call hybrid garb. It's hybrid garments. It's a typical and standard thing that hybrids wear when they're older. And this is early stage, which means she looks quite alien. Here's a baby that is sort of looks a little bit more human. With this woman here, the hair is very, very straggly. You notice the face is pointed. She's got a pointed chin and all that, and black eyes with just a tiny, 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 tiny bit of whites in them. This one, you have to look closely. She couldn't quite draw it in, but there are whites in the eyes here. It's very difficult to tell. This is wispy hair, and it's sort of bundled up in this cloth-like piece of material of some sort. Here's another one. Now this one she didn't. This one here is probably early middle stage, sort of a pointed chin. This is actually, you can see it barely here. This is wispy hair here. You can see the skull underneath it. A very small nose, a thin mouth, and the chin isn't quite as pointed. This is one where you can see, first of all, she's wearing hybrid garb. This is more typical, even more typical than the other one we saw with the caretaker, where she's got clothes that come down to here. So the child's got a 3/4 length or half length sleeves. It's a single piece. It usually goes over. This is not an opening here. I don't know why she put this in. But I don't know who did this. This was sent to me anonymously by a woman, I think in Las Vegas, who did not sign her name and said this is what she remembered. Now, the thing about hypnosis is people say things that are not true all the time, period. I am aware of that. They're not aware of it. It's up to me to figure out what's happening here, you know. And it happens most in the first session, less so in the second session, less so in the third session. By the fourth session, they're pretty accurate. By the fifth session, they're self-centering, and they know sort of, is this happening to me or is this not happening to me? There's a lot of reasons for that. And if you have 20 sessions with somebody, they're very good at separating out what's sort of real and what isn't real when they relate sort of what's happened to them. This is what you're looking at here is confabulation. This is straight confabulation. And the confabulation, anybody know what it is? Can you tell what it is just by looking at it? The head. The head is far too big for the body. The head is as big as the whole body practically. You can't support a head that size. That's confabulation, but that obviously in her memory, that was the most important thing. That's what stuck out in her memory, and that's what appears in this drawing. But you can see the wispy hair, slight little bit of whites in the eyes, a pointed chin, little tiny nose, little tiny mouth, hybrid garb, typical, absolutely typical, except for the size of the head, of course. Now, the thing is that there's this interaction with humans and these hybrid children, as we have come to call them. That is to say, people are brought in and they have to feed the baby, or they have to hold the baby. But babies grow up to be toddlers. And then they grow up to be young children. And then pretty soon they're older children, then they're adolescents, and then they're young adults, and then they're mature adults, and then we don't see them as older adults. And we don't know why. We don't even have any theories. We don't see them. We don't see 80-year-old hybrids. We don't see 90-year-old. We'll see 50-year-old hybrids, maybe. When I say we see, that is to say people describe them. But we don't really see them beyond that. So, and we're not certain why that is, but that is what people describe. Now, in this room, once again, circular room, this is a totally different person. The hybrid children here are wearing hybrid garb. This is their clothes. They've got thin sort of hair here, she's drawing them, and they've got a kind of toy to play with, which is a flat board-like thing that has lights on it or whatever it was. This is the abductee. This is actually, I can't remember how old she was. I think she was a young woman at this time. And she is supposed to play with these hybrid children, but in fact, they give her this to play with herself. And she is supposed to make this board, or whatever this thing is, show different lights on it, as I remember, with her mind. And what happens is the abductees will say, well, I can't do that. What do you mean, with my mind? It's not a concept, my mind. But the answer is, they realize, well, they can do that. Yeah, oh, wait a second, I can do that. And then the lights change and they can sort of maneuver it around. And I actually give a paper on this. If you saw me the last time, I was in LA years ago, just on hybrid toys and games and their meaning. And what is meaningful here is not the hybrid children, but the training of the abductee. The training that abductee to do things with her mind, as Royal we learn later on. Now here is an abductee right here, and here, now these are not wearing hybrid garb, they're wearing little one-piece or two-piece sort of suits of some sort, which is also not unusual. Here is a caretaker, and here is a gray alien. The caretaker is probably later stage, looks more human, and they have dolls. Now she has, I think this is her own dolly with a baby bottle. They have rag dolls that look like they have been made on board or something. You can see they're like stick figure dolls. And she is going to explain to them how you hold a baby, how you feed a baby, how you care for a baby. You put the baby on your shoulder and you pat the baby's back and you put the baby down for sleep and that sort of stuff. And they try to learn that. They try to emulate that. And eventually they give her a little toy to play with herself. It's a toy you're supposed to use your mind to, I think this toy was to raise up in the air, which is the most common of all toys we see, interestingly enough. And she grabs the toy, here's the caretaker, and here's her doll, and here's the rag doll, and she starts to shake it. And the caretaker says, no, 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 and so does everybody gets alarmed. Don't do that, don't do that, you're not supposed to shake this. No, 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 no. And then she stops shaking it, and everybody's happy again. Okay, that's better, that's better. And, but I thought this was interesting. She's smiling, shaking away with alarm. Now, sometimes these children really look quite human. Now you can see this one's got a fuller head of hair. I'm going to call this late stage, and I'll explain this all in a second. Got a pointed chin, a regular sort of face. She's wearing hybrid clothes here. This is the abductee. He was the one who was on that forked table with the abductee who was calming him. And she is staring into his eyes while he sits on this ledge. Which means that the hybrid children can do that. See, they can do what gray aliens do. What she's doing here, I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly, what information she was looking for, but extremely common. Now, what do I mean by early stage, late stage, and all the rest of that stuff? Well, back in the days of our youth, we used to think you take your basic sperm, you take your basic egg, you put them together, and then you do something to that fertilized egg. You add something. You alter something, or maybe you even add alien DNA, if there is such a thing as alien DNA, and I'm making a logical leap here. And then what you're going to get is a normal sort of spectrum. Some are going to look pretty alien, some are going to look pretty human, most are going to look in the middle. And that was true. I think that's true. That's what happens. But what I learned as I went along was that it's more complicated than that. And what you do is you take your basic sperm, you take your basic egg, you put them together, you add something, and then you get a sperm. Then you take your basic egg and you take your basic sperm, you put them together, and you add DNA from the hybrid. And then you get a skewed bell-shaped curve that has a tail. And the tail at the end of it looks more human. So you're going to have less of them looking more alien, a bunch in the middle looking in the middle, and a lot more who look more human. Then you do that again. You take the egg, the sperm, put them together, and then you take a DNA from that hybrid. Then you get a longer tail, a wider tail on the right-hand side. Some look sort of alienish. A bunch look kind of in the middle, but a lot more now look human. Then you do it again, then you do it again, then you do it again. And pretty soon you get ones that look pretty human. Just keep that in the back of your mind. Now, from time to time, people are brought in to a room and their attention is directed to a screen-like device somewhere. Now, on the screen, and here is a screen-like device, there might be any number of things to see. But you'll notice in this scene, I don't know if you can see it here, here's somebody sitting on a ledge. He's drawn this with sort of a breakaway room. Here he calls these guards. These are two small gray aliens. Here is another abductee sitting on this bench or ledge being looked at, or she's tending to little kids. You can just see their hybrid garb that they're wearing there. Abductees do not wear clothes. You can always tell an abductee in the picture by the one who's not wearing clothes. And here he is, and then there's a screen. Now, what do people see on the screen? Well, they see strange geometric shapes and colors floating slowly across the screen. That's unusual, but that's what they see sometimes. Sometimes they see verdant scenes of wilderness, beautiful, wonderful. That's also unusual. That's what they see, but that's what they see sometimes. Sometimes they see normal, everyday scenes of human life. And now we're going to jump right to the end here. And people will say, I'm seeing, like, and I think I wrote about this in the thread, I'm seeing a picnic. There's people playing ball, they're at a grill, they're talking, this and that. Now, all communication on board the object is telepathic. And there are just no exceptions to that. And this is one of the things I can say there's no exceptions. When you're dealing with gray aliens, now I'm going to make that caveat. When you're dealing with, and the reason that we can say that is because I don't think they have vocal cords or a movable mandible. You know, they don't have, I don't think they have a tongue. There's a very different apparatus. There's no evidence that they breathe in and out. There's no aspiration. And people say that they're hearing everything telepathically, and there are just no exceptions to that, unless a person doesn't know what happened to them, and then they say, yes, they talked to me, and they had a weird accent, and then you know immediately that they've had incompetent hypnosis, or they don't have any hypnosis at all, and they don't really know what happened. So the point is that in their mind's ear, they'll hear, at a picnic, let's just say, can you tell the difference between us and you? And they'll look at the screen and they'll say, no. They'll think, what are you talking about? Everybody is just a normal picnic. Everybody looks the same. People are having fun. And they'll say, see, isn't that wonderful? Isn't that great? Soon we will all be together. Soon everybody will be happy. Soon everyone will know his place. It's going to be wonderful. Now, you hear something like that once, and what you do is you put it on the back burner, you wait for confirmation from other people who are not aware of this testimony, and if it's never confirmed again, it's not evidence because you're looking for patterns. But after you hear it a number of times in similar ways, then you begin to think, wait a second, something is happening here. As we move forward, here is another screen. Now, this is sort of interactive. This is actually a woman. I just said all abductees don't have any clothes on, and here's an exception. She said she was wearing her nightgown. Almost certainly not. But who am I to argue? So she's brought before this is a council. These are symbols or something on the council. And up here is an alien. Okay, I hope you can see that in the back. Being chased by a group of angry humans. And her job is to, in some way, put her hands here or with her mind or something like that, placing her hands here in appropriate, symbols, yeah, to save. She's got to maneuver the UFO that she's on over the alien here to save him so he'll go up into it from the humans. And she said, well, I don't know how to do that. I can't do that. And then she realized, she said, well, wait a second. Maybe I can do that. Oh yeah, I remember that. And she starts putting her hands here, and then you can see she can see it's sort of moving, whatever the image she's looking at, over this alien. There's obviously no alien with a group of humans chasing him there. And they say, oh, that's good, thank you, that's very, very good. You did a good job, and they just take her away, and that's that. Now, the point here is that this is not very much different than playing with an object that has lights on it when you're a kid. And I began to understand that all this play, that stuff that I was looking at, tons of play accounts, all had to do with training of the abductee to perform tasks, mentally or physically or whatever it was. And as an adult, they're still doing it. And in Secret Life, I called it testing. We didn't know what it was. I thought they were testing reflexes, testing this, testing how much they knew, whatever they were testing. Now I would change that word. I would call it training. This is all part of a training procedure. Okay, next. Now, sometimes we see hybrids who are older. This is a hybrid in his 20s. He was wearing glasses of some sort. I don't know whether this is true or not. Both these cases were my colleague Bud Hopkins' cases. Here is another one wearing glasses, actually the same person, seen by another abductee. But we have to be careful with this, but you can see he's got sort of a pointed chin, and although everything looks pretty normal, blondish hair. Here's one that looks sort of like a hunk, wearing what might be called a uniform or something, close cropped hair, very large eyes, but looks quite, I call it late stage, a late stage hybrid, looks quite human. Here is one, I threw this in, I probably shouldn't have, but this is, these are two abductees. And they are being interrogated, they were abducted together, being interrogated by this hybrid here, and here is a hybrid standing here. This is sort of a close-up of this hybrid. Wearing a uniform. This is not an American military uniform, but it's close. It looks like maybe they purloined one or something like that. But a lot of people think that the government is conducting abductions. Me Labs, there's been books on it, and a lot of sincere and serious individuals believe that they've been abducted by the American military. And my answer to that is, if the American military had this kind of technology, I would jump for joy. It would be wonderful. There'd be no war. There wouldn't have been Saddam Hussein. One day he just would have disappeared in the middle of the night. They couldn't find him, and that's the end of that. And they would have to have had the technology since, as Bud Hopkins points out, since the Coolidge administration, because we have abductions all the way back to the 1920s and even before that we've looked at, and which meant that there wouldn't have been any Hitler, I mean, it just, the ramifications of the government having this kind of technology where they can take people through closed windows and through walls in the middle of the night and nobody sees them would be quite astounding, and we would be the king of the world. There's no doubt about that. There wouldn't be any Iraq, there wouldn't be any Iran, there wouldn't be any of that sort of stuff going on. It would just be all ours. But each time that I've had people say that the American military did it, I've looked at them. They've turned out not to be military, not to be Americans or human, even they're hybrids. Now, here I want to, before I show you a picture of the one picture I have of an actual hybrid, here's a middle stage hybrid. Now, he's got this sort of one-piece thing on. He's got this pointed chin, very wispy hair. This is the abductee. She is not wearing anything, although she thought she was, but later on confirmed she wasn't. This is actually, this thing he's pointing at on a screen is a road map. These are blocks, these are streets and so forth. These are houses, whatever it is. And he's telling her, in the future, your job will be to stand here, or wherever it is, and tell people it's okay, just move this way, just keep moving this way. They'll be panicked, they'll be frightened, but it's up to you to keep them in line, just keep them moving this way, just keep them that. That'll be her job in the future. And she's got to remember that. That's going to be her job. She's got to move those people in this direction. I've got a number of them, lots of them, moving people. It's a very common aspect of what's going to happen in the future. There will be panicked people. Their job is to calm them and keep them moving in an orderly fashion. And just because people want to see a hybrid, I decided to bring one. Now, this guy is extremely strange looking. And as you will immediately see, he has a glazed look on his face, you'll notice, of stupefaction, and trying to eat soup with chopsticks, very difficult to do for anybody, let alone a hybrid. Okay, and that's the end of that. Okay, now I'll start talking about ramifications of that. Is there some way to have the lights on just a little bit? I hate to do that to you, but I want to take Q&As as I go along with this as well, and there's no way I can see if anybody's hand is in the air. Perfecto there, and I don't know if you can do anything on this side. But, okay, here's the situation. What they began to talk about, and I began to hear more and more of these, soon we'll all be together stories. There'll be a scene of a group of people lined up, sort of, thank you, sort of facing, now I know who I'm talking to. I'm talking to pitch blackness there. Sort of facing the camera, like like a high school class taking their picture on the steps, you know what I mean, something like that. But it's like a dozen people. And the people hear in their mind's ear, the abductee, as they face this, or might even be an image in their minds, can you tell the difference between us and them? Or us and you, rather. And she'll say, or he'll say, no. And they'll say, well, isn't that wonderful? Isn't that great? Soon we'll all be together. And I began to hear this more and more. Soon the change is coming. There's going to be a change. Everybody's going to be happy. It's wonderful, it's wonderful. And what they're actually saying is, there's going to be a change coming, and we, aliens and hybrids, are going to be happy that it's coming. You, we don't particularly care about. But we think it's wonderful. It's terrific. It's going to be wonderful. And they're saying just that. But when you read between the lines of these things, you realize they're talking about themselves. It's going to be, that's what they're here for. Now, you have to understand that the abduction phenomenon is a global phenomenon. It is not an American phenomenon. We don't have a corner on the abduction market. It's all over the place. What that means is that somewhere along the line, and we can date this with a relative degree of uncertainty to the late 19th century, and if you want I can show you how we do that, but the point is that somewhere, sometime, somebody had to say, let's do it. Somebody from up there had to say that. And it set in motion a series of events that in my brain, which is not to be trusted, but in my brain had to happen. And in that had to happening, that means that when you take a look at these objects, they had to be designed for humans. The object, the tables have to be like human length. They're not 12 feet long, and they're not 2 feet long. They're human feet long. All of the instruments had to be designed for taking eggs, for taking sperm, for doing this, for doing that, for whatever they're going to do. All the incubators for the fetuses had to be designed. The designs had to be approved, we would assume, or something like that, because what we see on board these objects is a hierarchy of authority that flows from the top down. There are beings who give orders, and there are beings who take orders and give orders to other beings, and they're demarked by how they look. There's a sort of hierarchy of authority. The top ones are what people describe as insect-looking ones. They're the most alien-looking ones. They look like, people say like praying mantises, one of the most common types of descriptions, or ants or things like that. And they're extremely thin, and they don't have any mouth at all, and or nose apparatus. They got big eyes and all that. I don't want to go into another thing about, well, why aliens are described as having small mouths and little tiny holes for their noses. That's another interesting question. It's a very interesting question why they would have that. Well, the point is that the ones at the top had to say, let's do it, and starts this. Then everything's got to be manufactured. It's got to be designed. It's got to be manufactured. This is a global phenomenon. In other words, what I begin to describe just by those few words is a massive program around the world that is happening with tremendous frequency. And what that means is that there is an enormous, a mind-boggling amount of energy and effort and personnel that have gone into making this program work. And it has to be done clandestinely, secretly, so that people don't know what's happening to them. Because if it wasn't secret, there'd be no abduction phenomenon. If everybody knew what was happening, they'd take steps to stop it. And it can be stopped. And consequently, that can't be allowed. That's not going to be allowed. What you're looking at is a program of tremendous importance to these beings. This cannot be overstated, and I tend to speak in a bombastic fashion, as you'll notice, but I cannot overstate the importance of this program for them and what's happening. So we have this enormous effort that's going on, this clandestine phenomenon. People who are abducted don't know what the heck these... my colleague Bud Hopkins has worked with hundreds and hundreds of people, and I've worked with only about 150 people, and I've looked at about 1,100 different abduction events. I tend to spend a lot of time with each person, and I work with people over a number of years. And I still have one person I work with every once in a while who I worked with since 1987. And I can tell I'm looking for change over time. I'm a historian and all that sort of stuff, you know. And so we can see what's sort of happening. And the point is, though, that what we're looking at is the enormity of this program is breathtaking. It's just astonishing. It's serious business. This is not an experiment, obviously. This is not a learning situation. As I said, the evidence just wouldn't hold for it, and it doesn't. Now, in the 90s, what I began to notice was I began to hear things that I had never heard before, which was people who would tell me, well, these small gray aliens, they come and they take them out the window and they bring them up and this and blah, 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 blah. Then I would hear, well, the one who's taking me up is not not an alien, it's a hybrid. I think this one's a hybrid. He looks weird. He doesn't look like a gray. He's taller. He's got hair, you know, that sort of stuff. Okay. So they use some hybrids to take people up. Well, then the next thing I began to hear was, the hybrid is participating in the procedures. Then we began to hear that hybrids were conducting procedures by themselves, but with the gray aliens standing around. Then we began to hear that there were whole entire abduction sequences being done just by hybrids. They would look various stages of hybrids, but by hybrids, with no aliens around at all. And I thought, well, that's interesting, not knowing what that meant. Not only that, but abductees were being trained still. One person was trained to, they brought her over, and there was you just have to go along with me when I say this. There was a hybrid laying on a table. They were going to do something to the hybrid on a table. And almost sounds like a dish one would order. I'll have a hybrid on a table, please. But there's a hybrid on the table. And another hybrid takes a scalpel-like instrument and it makes an incision in the hybrid's neck. Then takes a pen-like device, maybe a device with a light on the end of it, like this laser pointer, and starts going like this, and the wound closes up, closes up, closes up, closes up. Okay, now it's gone. Then he does it again, and he gives the pen to the abductee who's standing next to him, watching this. Now she has to close up the wound. So she starts going like this, like this, like this, like this. She's trying her, it's not exactly working. And halfway through he takes over, he says, oh, okay, you've done a good job, you've done a good job, and then he finishes it. And she's being trained, still in the process of training for something. I mean, now, these people are in their 40s, they're in their 50s. Are they training people who are in their 90s? In other words, is this training for something that's going to happen in our lifetime? Or do they need a rolling stock of trained individuals so whenever they are needed, there is a stock of them, and when they get to be older and infirm, they can't be used, let's just say, but there'll be other young... I mean, there's that alternative hypothesis. We don't really know. Okay, so now here's what abduction research is like in the real world. A person's laying on my daybed, I've done an induction. Let's just say it's the 800th time I've done it. And they're telling me this happened to them, they were placed on a table, and they're taking sperm, they're taking on and on. And I'm thinking about what they're saying. And I'm thinking hard, really hard. I mean, I'm really, really into what they're saying. And then I realize I'm dreaming. I have fallen asleep. That has happened, and I am dreaming. And then I wake up, and they're still talking. Thank God they didn't hear that. They didn't know I was asleep. I've heard it so many times, over and over and over and over and over again. Of course, I do an abduction. I'm all relaxed myself, and consequently, and it's hours, and and so I've got to be aware of that. I got to be aware of that. I got to keep my eyes open. Starting in 2003, my eyes sprung open. I began to hear something that I had never heard before, like in baseball. I know the Dodgers are the winningest team and all the rest of that stuff. Of course, I live in Philadelphia, where the world champion the Phillies, but I was born and raised in L.A. So, but the fact is that baseball is the most beautiful, perfect, wonderful game ever invented. It's also the most boring. You see one game, seen them all. But about every seventh game or so, you'll see something you never saw before. Something that's never happened in baseball before. Like that Jose Canseco business, the ball bounces off his head and into the stands for a home run. Who would have thunk? You see something like that every once in a while. And it gets your attention outside of just the play of the game and the tension and all the rest of that stuff. And that's what it is in abduction research. So when you hear something different, it gets your attention. So a guy comes in to me, he's been referred by a mental health professional because he had had unusual experiences. And from the beginning, he tells me, this guy does not know anything about abductions and nothing about UFOs. He's one of the few people in the world who remained, you cannot escape it, but who remained relatively pure. He didn't know who I was. He didn't know who he was talking to. He just knew I was some guy who did these investigations. And which was fine. It was wonderful. He's got a friend, he tells me. He's a friend. He doesn't know who this friend is, but he's got a friend. He talks to this friend every once in a while. Oh, what do you mean? This friend, and he tells me the story. Like one time he was in California, and he was getting ready. He owned a catamaran, and it was on a beach. And he was polishing it up and putting wax on it and this and that and getting ready to use it. And there was a season where he was going to be using it. And his friend was there. He was doing it alone, and then his friend was there. And his friend asked him, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm polishing up. And his friend said, well, why are you doing this? He said, well, because I'm going to be using it pretty soon. Well, why are you rubbing it? Well, I'm making it look shiny. Well, why does it need to look shiny? Well, because blah, blah, blah. And the conversation was this, quote, friend asking questions, and the guy who I'm working with answering. That was the conversation. So I said, well, did you see him approaching on the beach? Did you see this guy suddenly, because nobody around, he's coming towards you, he's coming right towards you? Did you see that? No. I said, well, did you see him leave? Did he say, well, okay, it was nice talking to you, see you later, and then walk away? No, he doesn't remember that. I said, well, did he just say goodbye? No, he didn't say that either. I said, well, didn't you think that was odd that you didn't see him and there he was and you talked with him and you answered all his questions and then you didn't see him? Don't you think that's odd? He said, no, I don't think it was odd at all. What's there to be odd about, So, well, okay. Then he shows up at a car wash. What are you doing? Well, I'm washing a car, vacuuming it. Well, why do you do that? Because it was dirty. And another series of questions. And it turns out that this guy has been visiting this 53-year-old man in front of me for a number of years. And now he was very much involved with the abductee's life. Talking about relationships, talking about sexual adventures with your wife, without your wife, and this and that with him. And mainly, my guy is explaining things, and he's explaining what relationships are and how they work and how you be a friend. And this guy says, well, he says, this is very unusual. The friend does, who I will call Fred, the friend. Fred says, it's unusual for you and me to be friends because most people like me are friends with people who are women. But you are my friend, and we're two men. See, that was unusual for him. Okay. And I thought to myself, I don't know what's happening here. Huh? What's going on? What is this? I've never heard anything like this. Now they're going places together, and they're doing things, and they went to a ball game, and they went to another country. Actually, they didn't go together, but they met there, and they stayed overnight in a tent on a fishing expedition of some sort in a Latin American country. And I'm thinking, I don't think so. This doesn't sound right. Something is wrong. You put all that stuff on the back burner waiting. Then the next thing I know, another person comes and starts talking to me about this person who's been visiting her a lot. And she's been explaining relationships to this person. And this person is always around her. And then another one begins to tell me that all sorts of things that I had never heard before. And one of them is a woman I've been working with since 1987 who was unaware of these other events. And I begin to think something is happening. This might be the change as they've been talking about for years now. Now, what I have sealed up tight in my tiny little brain is a proposal for a book about the change, because I believe it is upon us now. And as it turns out, it's far more complicated than I had thought. Well, one day we'll wake up and there they are, sort of like a Hollywood movie version, like by Invasion of the Booby Hatchers or whatever it is. And they'll be there. No, it's not like that. It's a whole different thing. There's a whole procedure and bureaucracy of bringing people down who will live here. And it's a world unto itself, all extremely well thought out. All of it's sort of astonishing as I'm hearing, I don't want to overstate how many people. It's only about 8 people who have told me these things, but that's a lot in this area, considering that I'm working with 3 people now. 2 have not said anything and 1 has that relates to this. So not everybody is involved with this yet. I think we're looking at the beginnings of it. Now, there is no possibility that I have found the beginnings of it in the Philadelphia area. It's not possible. If I have uncovered it there, then it's everywhere. That's all there is to it. It's everywhere. There's no way, there's nothing special about being in Philadelphia or in that area. Just take my word for it. There's nothing. But the fact is, though, that I begin to hear these things. Well, it begins with training procedures. And what happens is an abductee will have kids, young children, let's just say age 10, 11, 12, whatever, come down and visit her or him in their apartments or their homes. And she'll have to give a tour. This is a refrigerator. What's a refrigerator for? Well, you put food in there. You put food in it. It keeps it cold, keeps it from going bad, Oh, okay. Shows up the cupboard. This is where the cupboard is. There's cans of food and packages and stuff. Well, how come they don't go in the refrigerator? Well, they don't need the coldness. But after you open a can, you might want to put it in the refrigerator. Oh, I see. This is a stove. Okay. And she has to explain that on, and she explains things. And I began to hear lots of these stories of people coming down, and they have to explain things in their house, normal things. Now, the thing is, when you took a look at those hybrid children playing there, the first thing you notice, they're sitting on the floor. The second thing you'll know about them is they don't have a mother and a father. They are removed and put into those tanks. Then they are created. It's not like they're born and they have a birthday. Not only that, they have no mother and father, so the things that you and I would learn normally, naturally, like what a plate is for, or a glass, or a fork. You just learned that through osmosis, just through being alive. You just know that. That has to be taught to these children when they're older. All of this has to be. Some of it is taught when they're younger, but the amount of material that we pick up just in life on a daily basis is virtually infinite. And the amount of material that they pick up on board an object is very, very finite. So I will tell you a story, for example. When one wakes up, she's an abductee. This is a person who's being abducted all the time, and she's being trained, and she's part of the hybrid settlements program. And here's a 10-year-old kid with a caretaker who is sort of a late-stage hybrid, but not what I call human stage now. And he is there with the kid. The kid's about 10, as I said. Well, he wants to look around. Okay, fine. So she shows him the stove, and this is where you cook. Well, why do you need two places? How come you have to put the food in there, and then on that, why do you need two places to cook? She explains that. She opens up a drawer. He has to look at what's this for, what's this for, He's especially interested in the rails on the side of the drawer that has her cutlery in it. The rails, And then he goes in, and she explains what the icebox is, and she opens up the freezer, and he asks what that is, and she says, well, that's where we make ice in there, and things get frozen. He says, oh, I've heard of ice. I know about ice. Can I feel one? Can I have one? And she says, well, if I put one in your hand, it'll burn your hand in a sense. I mean, it's too cold. You can't just hold it. It's too cold. He says, no, it's okay. It's all right. It'll be all right. Don't worry. So she takes an ice and puts it in his hand, and he holds it in his hand for about 30 seconds, then he drops it. And he puts his hand up to his cheek to feel how cold it was. This is hybrid life. Now they go into the living room. Now the caretaker is sitting on the couch, and the woman goes over and sits on the couch, and the kid is by a lounge chair, a stuffed chair, an upholstered chair, arms and the whole thing, with a blanket over it. And the kid looks at the chair and says, why is there a blanket over it? And she says, well, we didn't like the color of the chair. It was given to us by a family member. So he looks under the blanket and says, oh, I like the color. Color is fine. It was some orange color, whatever. Oh, well, he likes the color. Okay, fine. So the caretaker says, sit down. So the kid, then now we come to an existential crisis. The kid comes over and sits down right on the very, very edge of the chair, right where your legs, right there on the edge, and they're right on the edge. And he's very anxious about this. And then he sits up and he doesn't want to sit down. And the caretaker says, well, it's okay, you can sit down. And sit back. No. He's not going to sit back. That's not going to happen. No, he says, it's soft. I'll fall right through. I'm not going to sit on that. I'll fall through. So the woman says, no, it's hard inside. There's a support inside. It's just soft on the outside. So he gets up and he walks around and he feels the back of it and he realizes, oh, there is something hard there. Oh, okay. Then he comes and he moves slowly, slowly, slowly back, and he sits back, and then he's okay. The sitting in the chair event. And you listen to that and you think, who would invent something like that? How does this come into somebody's mind if they're making this up? It's so off the wall. It's so unusual and yet so ridiculously mundane. The event is not exactly dramatic. But you have to understand, this kid has never sat on a padded chair in his life. As you can see from those pictures, he might sit on a ledge and maybe he'll sit back against the wall, or mainly he's sitting on the floor or else on a little square that comes up, which is a normal kind of seat for many of them. He's 10 years old. It's the first time he's ever sat in a padded chair. Scared the hell out of him. Then I began to hear things like, well, not only are they coming into my, I have to remind myself, coming into the house, but I'm going out with them. I am teaching them how to drive. I've got a couple of them like that now. These are older, age 17 to about 23, give or take. They don't know how old they are. You ask them how old they are, they don't know. They'll say somewhere between 16 and 18, they don't know, And so they take her out in her car, she drives, to a parking lot in an area of the town that she lives in that's one block is to be torn down and a lot of other stores are all empty. And so it's a parking lot with weeds in it up against a brick facade or side of a building. And so there's spaces you can, like at the wall, and there's other spaces around too. And there's one car that's parked there by the building. It's like 3 in the morning. There's a group of older teenagers or younger adults waiting to be taught how to drive. Okay, they're going to use her car. So she stops the car. One gets in, gets behind the wheel, and she knows what she's supposed to do. And she says, "You turn the ignition on." Now, I don't know where you learned how to drive. I learned how to drive at Lakewood High School in Lakewood, but I taught my kids in a parking lot. Drive around the parking lot in a school parking lot on a Sunday, so nobody would be there. And that's sort of what they're doing. So she says, "Now you have to put the handbrake down or whatever it is, and you put the car where it says D and drive." And you put your hands on the steering. She teaches them, you press on the gas just a little bit, and the guy starts driving. And you can't drive too far because it's relatively small, so he drives around. And then she says, "Okay, now park the car." And so he decides he wants to park the car sort of where near the other car is. So he slowly pulls up right next to the other car. So I don't know if you've ever had these experiences in long rows of bathroom stalls. You're in there, and you can hear somebody walking all the way down there going right next to you. Well, so she parks the car right there. So, okay, everything is fine. They both, he gets out. Now another one gets in. Now, the first thing this guy's got to do is go in reverse because they're up against this wall. So she says, you put it on R in reverse. Put your foot slowly on the accelerator and back, and just don't turn the wheel, just back straight out, So he slams his foot down, he twists the wheel, the car comes flying out, thank God, on a curve that missed the car next to him, and a surge of adrenaline went through her. Ah! And she popped out of this passive state she had been in and said, "Where the heck am I? What's happening here? Who are you?" She opened up the door and she ran into basically an empty lot, field of shrubbery, grass and stuff, weeds mainly. They ran after her, calmed her down through a neural engagement, and everything was okay again, and she resumed the driving lesson. The driving lesson. You write a book about that. The driving lesson. It's just the oddest thing. And you get case after case after case. Kid visits this woman, same woman, only a different kid. And he's heard about computers. He wants to know about computers. Okay. She brings him up to her computer in her office. And he says, "What do you do with it?" He says, "Well," she says, "it's for communication." That he doesn't understand. Communication with him is telepathic. You can write things to people and send them, and then they can get a message. Oh, okay, I see. And what else do you do with it? Well, you can compute things. You can add things. It can be used for that. A lot of people like to play games on them. He says, "What kind of games?" And she says, "Well, there are little computer games. You run through mazes or you shoot things or whatever it is." Oh, he says, "That's silly. He doesn't like that. No interest in that whatsoever, none." a kid who has no interest whatsoever in games. Most kids would say, oh, I want to try that. That's for me, yes. 10-year-old boy or a 12, whatever he was, 12-year-old boy. So I begin to collect lots and lots and lots of these accounts from different people, these 8 different people, all the way through, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't like what I am hearing. This is not what I bargained for. This is happening now. Now the thing is, it's not just that they're visiting here, they're living somewhere. And I begin to get accounts of them in apartments, moving in 3s. In order to move in, they have to have an advance man first, so to speak, come there and get the apartment for them. And they are what I call independents, who are living on their own by themselves in other apartments. But that's not the critical event. The critical event is to protect them. Because humans like to beat people over the head with crowbars, you know what I mean? And that's just what we do. And so this must be prevented. So there are another group of people who control an area, and all of this is sort of locally geographical. So there's an independent who controls this area. There's a security man who also controls this area to make sure that everybody is safe. Now, what do you mean by safe? Well, they have to learn that you just don't wander out in more high-crime areas of the city and go into a park at 3 o'clock in the morning. That would be not safe. They have to learn that, see? And, but the key thing they mean by safe is making sure the abductee does not tell anybody what's happening. Because once hybrids are on the ground, once there's little teensy-weensy feet on the ground, security goes sky high. Now security is everything to protect the young ones, as they call them. That means that the abductee cannot say anything about what is happening whatsoever to anybody ever. Now, back in the good old days, when this wasn't happening, people would say, I'm remembering everything and I'm telling it to Dave Jacobs. And they say, don't do that. That's not good. Now, you shouldn't do that. That's bad. That's bad. Now, don't do that. Now, get on the table. And that would be the end of it. Now, if they find out that an abductee is saying these things, now it's serious repercussions. For the abductee first, to get the first line of defense, stop the abductee from saying anything. And I couldn't ever imagine why there was this one person, this guy who I started working with, who had the friend who saw me about a dozen times and then totally cut off any communication with me whatsoever, never answered my emails, never came to my abductee get-togethers, never, ever, ever, never. And I thought, God, maybe it's my deodorant. Who knows what it is? Something's wrong with me. And I thought, as I learned, my guess is that they probably got to him. Because now it's so critical that they don't say anything. So you have a security apparatus, you have an independent who basically is in charge of the abductees, making sure that they're helping these people. And what do? Middle of the night, they go to an all-night Walmart and buy clothes, or they buy stuff for the apartment. Here's a story. These things come to me as I invent them. Nobody knows the difference. A woman goes to an apartment. She goes to an apartment. She lives a couple hundred miles from me, whatever it is. And it's a fairly large apartment complex. She walks in, and there's 3 hybrids. And they've got furniture. And I don't know whether it's used furniture or put together furniture, whatever, and they furnished the apartment. All the furniture is in the corner of one room. There's a couch, there's a table, they've got furniture. It's furnished now, see? She says, no, you can't do that. You have to move the couch over towards this way. And you have to put a table in front of it and maybe a television or something, because it's going to look weird if you don't have a TV, you know? It's particularly in front of a couch. It's just going to look weird, and you don't want to stand out. You don't want to look strange. Yes, no. They're going to do this right away. And she goes through it, and the table, this is going to be the dining area. You have to put a table and chairs right here. And another chair goes over here, etc., etc. Now she goes into the bedroom. And they're all keying on her. How does the bedroom look? Bedroom looks fine. She says, do you have sheets? They pull a little blanket back. There are sheets on the bed. She says, where's the pillow? They said, well, is this what you mean? And they pull out a drawer, and there's pillows with pillowcases still in the package. You know, the two packages. And she says, well, you have to have a pillow on the bed. Well, do you need a pillow? They've obviously never slept with a pillow, ever. Yes, you need a pillow, so she shows them how to put the pillow in and put the pillow on the bed. Okay. They go into the bathroom. Everything looks fine. She says the shower curtain is grungy, it's mungy, it gets mildew on it and all the rest of that stuff. You got to take down that shower curtain and put another one up, otherwise it's going to look weird. Okay, they got that one. They'll put up a new shower curtain. And then her job is done for that evening. She's helped them. Then she goes into another apartment, like a week later or something like that, and they want her to show, there's some hybrids there, and there's there's a security person there too, there's some other people, I won't even go into it. But they want her to show how to work the phone, and they had gotten this old princess phone or something. It's a phone where you dial up and it's on, you know what I mean? It's not on a cradle, but it's although I guess it was on a cradle. They want to know how to work it. And she looks and she says, well, it's got to be plugged into the wall. There's a telephone connector in the wall. Oh, they didn't know that. And you have to call up the phone company and you have to get a service. Otherwise, it's never going to work. Oh, okay. No, they've learned that now, see. In other words, every aspect of life has to be taught in some way. And this becomes, for some abductees, a full-time occupation. That's what they do. They teach hybrids how to be human. Or should I say, how to look human. Now, they look human. They look just like you and I. People used to ask me over the years, do you think hybrids are walking among us? And I loved that question because I got to say, absolutely not. There's no evidence whatsoever that anything is happening like that. And that made me feel good because I was not crazy, like people who claim that hybrids are walking around among us. And so I love that question because I got to say no. Now when people say, are hybrids walking among us, my sense is, yes, I think so. At malls, a favorite place, or anywhere, it's really extraordinary. It's amazing, and it seems to be happening in other countries as well, as I've been hearing from other people in other countries that they're having these odd things where they're passing judgment on how these beings look like, what these beings look like, and how they'll pass okay if they'll look human when they're here, and this is part of it too. I haven't even gone into that. Or one person wrote that she felt that she was taking hybrids to stores to buy things. And this is very, very common, odd as that may seem. And so I find myself in this very, very odd situation of saying now that, well, I think the change is here. I think that it is happening now. It is not happening in a way that I described. It scares the hell out of me. I don't like this. I don't like what I'm hearing. I used to be, except for 1 year, when I was 21, starting at age 22, I spent my entire adult life studying UFOs and abductions, my entire adult life. And I used to be thrilled with it, enthusiastic, and maybe this means contact. And I've learned, of course, that contact is a meaningless concept. The concept of contact is pure popular culture in its most pristine version. It has nothing to do with the reality of the situation, the concept of contact. But years ago, I thought there was contact. The meaning is it's going to be like Day the Earth Stood Still. He comes out, he's got his flying saucer landed on a White House lawn or whatever it is, and then he's got a gift that will cure cancer, stop war, whatever it is. Hey, it made sense to me. It's all popular culture. It has nothing to do with the reality of the situation that people have described to me. And what they've described to me is really much, much more frightening, I think, and much more bizarre. And I find myself being a little bit unnerved, if not unhinged, by it. Certainly unnerved, anyway. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you very much. I'm going to take as many questions as you have.
Like they're doing some sort of genetic engineering and test tube babies, etc., to create a society that's getting closer and closer to looking like us, but with their capabilities.
Thank you for that question.
Would you say that it's for purposes of integrating or invading?
I call it an integration into the society, but you've hit on a critical event. And the critical event is they have powers that we do not have. They can control us, and we cannot control them. Now, as we move through the hierarchy of this phenomenon, people describe the ability to control their minds through staring procedures or through other procedures to be strongest in the ones at the top of the hierarchical ladder. And they get weaker and weaker and weaker all the way to human stage hybrids, where they're the weakest. Weakest means they can control us and we can't control them, period. That makes us a society that is lesser, a species that is lesser. It's not like the difference between us and cats, but it might be like the difference between us and bonobos, which are the highest form of chimps. Although it's probably closer, doesn't matter. Makes us second class and then first class. That's the bottom line. The key question we don't know the answer to is, why is this happening? Why is this happening? We don't know why it's happening. We don't know the answer to that. Now, if this was psychological, we'd know the answer to that. If people are making everything up, they'd make that up too, obviously. I was talking at dinner with Steve about some of the aspects of this that militate against psychology, that just in terms of the stories. Now, there's heavy-hitting arguments against psychological origin of this, and this is a phenomenon that's either psychological or it's happening. One of the two. There's no in the middle. And but one of the things we were talking about is how people, one of the first things I realized, people are going right through windows and walls and that sort of stuff, but mainly windows when they're abducted out of their rooms or wherever they are in the house. They're going right through a window. And I would tell people, well, before you get to the window and you go out the window and up, do you open the window? Do you open the window? And they say, no, I don't open the window. I say, well, do these gray beings who came in your room, do they open the window, And they'll say, no. I say, well, does the window open by itself? Maybe some sort of telekinesis or who knows. They say, no, I think I'm going directly through the closed window. And they say, does anybody else ever describe that? And the answer is, yes, everybody. But in the beginning, nobody was saying anything like that. Now, here's the point. If they're making this up, They would not make that up because that makes their story less believable. They would say, "Sure, we opened the window." And out I went, and nobody would be the wiser. It would make perfect sense. Why do you insist on going through a closed window? What's the point psychologically? You know what I mean? Or, I said everything is telepathic. If this were psychological, that would not be the case. I would say, "Can you hear what they're saying?" And they would say, "Yeah, well, they have weird accents, but sure I hear it, of course." In other words, a lot of them, particularly in the early years, wouldn't even know about telepathy. They just hear it right through their ears, and they don't say that. Only when there are human stage or late stage hybrids do the hybrids talk with their mouths, and then only in public, and not on board the object, and not when they're alone. But it would look weird if they didn't. So they talk with their mouths in public. This is an extremely well thought out program. So you asked several dynamite questions. Have I ever been made aware that they are aware that I am aware? The answer is yes. And I can't go into these things right now. I will write another book about that later if I can get a couple of other books published first. But it wound up scaring the hell out of me and my family, I have to admit. And it was not exactly a traumatic event, but it was a series of really serious threats and follow-up things. And eventually they got the woman to stop communicating with me, period. And so I used to say, "Oh, pay no attention to anything like that. I've been doing this work for years and years. I've been threatened a million times, means nothing." I cannot say that anymore.
So the hybrids were threatened?
Yes.
So they implied that it would be physical?
Yes, there's that. One of these days I will write about, maybe even in this next book that nobody will publish, what happens when people go off the reservation and they actually start to talk about this. And there was a modus operandi they used for abductees, which is both verbal threats and then physical threats, et cetera, et cetera. You can see there's an escalation. They all do the same thing. It's the craziest damn thing. They'll come up to a woman or a guy and press their thumb hard into cheek, and it doesn't make a mark, but in some way it causes some sort of pain. They say, "You see, we can do that. We can hurt you if we want." But it's, what the heck? And yeah, so the weirdest damn thing, but I've heard it enough times to know that that's what they do. I'm going to continue here, and then I'll just go around that way.
Yes, in your description of the various types of aliens you've seen, could you conclude that any single one of the various alien body types would their physical structure be? Would it be superior to a human's physical structure in terms of dexterity and strength?
Great question. In other words, do alien body types? You take a look at thin aliens with thin arms and no muscle mass and all the rest of that stuff. And the answer is, this is an extremely advanced technological civilization who learned how to do all these sorts of things in ways of which we could not even imagine. Now, the question is, and I'm going to just transform your question into a totally different question that you didn't even ask. The question is, how many aliens are there? What kind of aliens are there? This always comes up. And there used to be guys, abduction researchers say there are 241 aliens who have been visiting Earth. This is the answer to that question. And I'm going to make this into a long answer, just so that everybody's properly bored when they leave. The answer is, what we see here is basically several types. There's the insect-like ones. There's the taller gray aliens, the smaller gray aliens. There's hybrids, and we're going to put that in the alien world. And then off to the side, and now here comes the controversial thing, to a far lesser extent, by huge numbers, people describe reptilian. And when they were described reptilian, I have them draw it, and it goes all over the place, and we don't know much about reptilians, although people, because sometimes they use the word reptilian, it's in the Bible, and I just go to the internet, say type in alien, reptilian, and there's 10 trillion hits, Let me tell you that. Pay no attention to any of them. Now then, the reptilians scare people. Oh, I don't like that one. Oh, he's bad, I don't like him. Well, what is he doing to you? Is he doing anything bad to you? No, he's not touching me, buddy. I don't like him, he's bad. Well, is he threatening you? Is he? No. Well, what? Why is he bad? I don't know, but he's bad. Well, what is he doing? Well, he's doing some procedure that we see the other aliens doing. In other words, we see no difference in what they do than any of the other aliens. So the question is, why are there ones that look in this variety of other sizes and shapes, but mainly reptilian or whatever? We don't know. You have to take a look at the hybridization program and how it worked and what are the failures, what are the non-failures, what are they being used for. That's a whole world that we don't know that much about. The bottom line is this. All the aliens that we see, whatever they look like, are all together on board the same objects, not necessarily the same one, but in the same UFO phenomenon. They all do the same procedures. They're all working with the same goal. They're all part of the same program. That is the bottom line, period. Now comes the boring part. I don't know all this. I only know what people tell me. Now, you can make an argument for our being alone in the universe. That is a legitimate, scientific, dumbass argument. But it is an argument that can be made. And there's been books written about it. Rare Earth is the most important one, etc., etc. The tilt of the Earth is so unusual, and the moon, and on and on and on and on. There's all sorts of things which this guy says, these two people who said, gave rise to life. Okay, that's fine. You can do that. That's fine. I don't believe it. But you cannot make an argument for two. It's just us and the aliens that we see. If we see a group of aliens together, you can't make it. If there's 2 trillion. Or 2 gazillion. You can't have 2. 1 you can have, oddly enough. But 2 is out of the question. That's not going to happen. So we don't know other aliens. There might be other aliens who are not involved with the abduction phenomenon, who are visiting here on a routine basis. For all I know, I'm never going to know because I only talk to people who are abductees. Now, have other people been in contact with aliens who are not abductees? Some people claim to have been. I would be very, very, very careful with those claims. Very careful. I would be very careful. It's the best I can say. Coming around to a question here. Yes?
Yes, a number of scientists think we're a few decades away of merging humans with computers. And Richard Dolan and other respected researchers speculated once that aliens might as likely be that merger of biology and machine as a traditional concept. In your research, have you seen any evidence of that sort of merger with the aliens or even the hybrids?
Cyborgs, you mean?
Yeah,
aliens and robotics or...
Yeah.
The answer is no. We see all the beings are living, sentient beings who, if you poke them in the eye, causes damage. Liquid damage. And the reason I say that is because I have a case where a woman got loose from, she was walking down a hallway, they were carrying her like this, and she picked up her arm and wham! And hit a small gray alien in the eye, and a liquid spurted out. And they hustled the alien aside, and they said, "Oh, that was bad. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that." And they, got her in the restraints very quickly. I mean, they put her under a control where she could not do that, and everything else boils down to the fact that this is just another civilization of sorts. It's not a civilization as we would know it from what we can tell. It really truly is alien. But we don't see a mixture of gears and electronics, but maybe it is there. I don't know. I used to think, well, one of the things we don't see is baby aliens. Well, I guess there's no reason to have baby aliens on board an object if they're there for a task. But we don't know. In other words, we don't know how aliens are produced. Maybe they're stamped out of a die. Just got an assembly line back there, is one after another. Who knows? We don't know that aspect. But we do know that these are living, sentient beings who have minds of their own, corporate though they may be, and don't appear to be robotic. Not that I have any investment in them not being robotic, but we don't see the evidence for it.
Here in the back.
They're in the back. Okay. Yeah.
Do the hybrids ever talk about a god, or do they criticize us for our concept of a god?
The answer to the first one is no, and the answer to the second one is they don't get it. I've dealt with people who are ministers and dealt with people who are very, very, very religious people, and one was a member of was an oblate in so forth, and religious things, spiritual things, transformational things, blank, zero, nothing. Don't get it, don't know it, don't. They have no interest in it. Nothing. Wait, I'm going around the room here, and you had your hand up next. But I remember. John Mack, yes.
And Bud Hopkins is retired.
Oh, he hasn't retired. I saw him just on Friday.
Oh, but my question is, do you stand alone now? Are you the only one who believes this?
I'm going to rephrase your question. The question is, does Bud Hopkins find the same thing that I found? And his answer is no, because he is afraid to go there. He doesn't want to delve deeply enough into this phenomenon to find these kinds of things. He thinks that he just doesn't like that. So he tends to, at least that's what he says. The answer is, do other UFO researchers find this as, the question is, do other researchers find this as well, or do I stand alone? And right now, for all intents and purposes, I stand alone with my 8 people. But you know, at the same time, when Bud wrote Missing Time in 1981, and he took 7 abductees, and he put them together and he showed the patterns in them, he stood alone. In a sense, because he was the first person to sort of organize this in a real pattern that nobody else could do. And nobody had found what he had found either. So, you know, the answer is, I want to train as many people to do this who are capable of doing it. And the problem here is that doing abduction research is, it has to be a labor of love. It's not something that you can just do. You have to dedicate your life to it. It's a black hole you fall into and you cannot climb out of. And you're delving into exceptionally personal details of people's lives that they don't tell their husbands or their wives or their shrinks or anybody. And you have to be able to say the right thing at the right time, right now. And it's a learning curve. It's a steep learning curve. And I learned from Bud early on, and I sort of went off on my own in a sense. But, and there's an awful lot of people who approach this subject with an agenda. It's a religious agenda, a New Age agenda, a spiritual agenda, a transformational agenda, whatever agenda it is. They've got the agenda, and they will in fact get what they want out of the abductee. Now, in hypnosis, all abductees are aware of the fact that they don't want to be led. They're all aware of the fact that they don't want to pick up things in popular culture and parrot them back to me and all that sort of stuff. And I'm aware, obviously I'm aware of that. And anybody who knows anything about hypnosis is aware of that. But at the same time, there are people who have expectations of what this phenomenon should be, and they will, in fact, find little pieces here and there that they will ask the abductee to elaborate on. It might be confabulation. They get involved in what I call a mutual confirmational fantasy. I think John Mack did this, and he was a hell of a nice guy. I knew him from the beginning, and he was a wonderful person. But the abduction phenomenon never fit his expectations, and he could never force it to fit his expectations. And 2 years before he died, he got out of abduction research altogether and closed down his peer group and his abduction groups and all the rest of that stuff, and went into things spiritual, where he was much more comfortable. And So the fact is, though, that bad hypnosis will draw out spiritual New Age things and make some people feel better. I think it's a bad deal. I think that when people come to me, they want to know what happened to them, period. It's not up to me to lead them off into a path of righteousness or something like that. They just want to know what happened to them. They've been searching, they want to know, and I will help them deal with the problems that are involved with this, and I will present scenarios where this could be a problem, etc., etc. But it's their lives and not my life. And I do not have an agenda. My agenda is only involved with what I have learned. I'm a historian. I don't slant my history, to emphasize the wonderfulness of the United States and its history, like they used to do in the 19th century, actually. But modern academics are supposed to be neutral and all that, and I try to be as much as I can. I don't foist off spiritual things on people and all that.
I got one over here. Quick one. Any evidence of...
He doesn't get to ask a question.
Any evidence of time travel, that they have the ability to move through time?
There is no evidence for that. Time travel has a built-in paradox. Yeah. Now, I know nothing about time travel except the following lecture that I give for 5 minutes to my UFO class. And even my older son can poke holes in it, but I'll tell you the argument anyway. The argument is, if time travel exists, and they're coming from the future, they wouldn't be coming from the past, obviously, they're coming from the future, that means that the future has already happened. It's already happened. We're living in some other period in the past, but that future's already happened, because here they are from the future. Now, when they come back, can you in fact alter the society? Can you change things? Can you shoot your grandfather? That's the paradox, and all the rest of that stuff. And my answer is, I don't know. But all I know is that if they are from the future, they are coming back, and people are seeing them, and the society is altered in such a way that inevitably and must, and absolutely, and without, and positively, all these words are wrong, all that must lead to a series of events that causes them to build a time machine and fly back. And when they come back here, they must absolutely positively change the society that would lead it to building ultimately a time machine so they can get in it and fly back. And when they get here, they must absolutely... It's a loop you cannot get out of because it's already happened. That's one of the problems with time travel, you see what I mean?
There's no reports of that sort of thing from your abductees?
No. Okay. Now, there are things like parallel universes. There's a fifth dimension, a recording group from the 1980s. There's all sorts of things like that out there. There's supposed to be 11 dimensions. I don't know. I have trouble dealing with one, to tell you the truth. But the fact is that it doesn't matter to me. I don't care. I don't care about their propulsion system. I don't care how they go to the bathroom. I mean, maybe that's more interesting. But, all I care about is why they're here and what they're going to do to us. That's the critical event for me. That's what I want to find out about. I want to know what's in store, what they're doing here, how they got here. That's an engineering question. And the reason that that's a critical question is because all scientists say the following situation. They say, space is big, time is long. Even traveling at the speed of light, blah, 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 blah. You can't get here from there. Case dismissed. And the answer is, that is stupid. The question is not, how do they get here? The question is, are they here? That's the question. You cannot say, they can't get here. We don't have the technology we can foresee for to enable them to get here. Therefore, they are not here. That's stupid. All scientists think this. And they can't get past the stumbling block. Even Alan Hynek could never get past that stumbling. He was one of the dean of UFO researchers, if you know anything about UFO history, the great UFO researcher, and he could never get past that either. And he began to think of all sorts of ultra-terrestrial theories and how they could how they could go through different parallel universes, whatever it was. It doesn't matter. Are they here or are they not here? We'll find out these engineering and physics questions later on. That's the way I look at it anyway.
Question over here.
You're next.
Do you feel that they may have created us or input DNA from maybe a primitive life form and create humans as we know it? And a follow-up question is, do you think our government has been in contact with these people?
Created governments. I gotta keep those things in my mind. The older I get, the harder it is. First of all, have they created us? I had one person describe sort of events which suggested that they might have altered something somewhere along the line which led to a sort of explosion of Homo sapiens. Yet at the same time, there was Homo erectus, there was Homo this, or there was Neanderthals, etc., etc. They were pretty smart. The more we learn about them, the smarter they get. And so the answer is, the evidence is not in that there's any creation involved or that they were here before the late 19th century. We really don't have evidence for that, although who knows? We cannot make with chimps, we can't make with gorillas, and chimps are 3% difference than us or something like that, and you cannot mate with a chimp. I have tried and tried and tried. It is not possible, I can guarantee you that. And, well, the other point is, so that's why I say if they even have DNA, we don't know. We know that there's an alteration of the zygote which produces this kind of bell-shaped curve, and we know that this continues on and on. We know that there are more and more human ones. We know. We think. And that's my best guess based on the evidence. You're dealing with future biotechnology. Who knows what they can bioengineer from their own DNA? Well, Eric Van Daniken, let's just say he is not exactly kosher. Government is next. Eric Van Daniken, you got to remember, he wrote his second book from his jail cell. Let us all keep that in mind. He started off the of the gods craze in the 1970s. Chariots of the gods, gold of the gods, give me the money of the gods. Anyway, and then he, as he described once, he embellished for dramatic effect, quote, end quote, in the Playboy magazine interview. I don't like that. Does the government know? I'm one of the few humans on the earth who's not a big conspiratorial theorist and not heavily into Roswell. I don't find the evidence for compelling for these things. But the problem with conspiracy theories is that they're non-falsifiable. You can never prove that they don't exist. And if the government says, listen, we don't know anything about this, we don't care about this, and go away, the fact that they're denying it means that it's a conspiracy so deep, the act of denial is evidence of the conspiracy. It's non-falsifiable. You can never prove it's not happening. But this is the way I look at it. Let's say that the government does know about it, and the government's got a super secret study of it, and they got some aliens in jars and pickles and all that. All right, the answer is yes. I hope so. My dreams have been answered, along with my microphone. I hope that happens. Yes, I want that to be true. Don't you understand? If there's a government conspiracy to hide some sort of a study, and you'd have to be studying it, you want that. What's there not to want? You want them to be looking at it. You want them to be studying it. People don't get it. That's yes, you want that. That would be wonderful. That's what you want. You want a government study of the subject. The problem here is that the government takes its cues from the scientific community. You're next. Government takes its cues from the scientific community. The scientific community in the year 2009, which will date this DVD, is at this point in time not just passive about it or nonchalant about it or not caring about it. They are aggressively hostile to the subject. I have never seen these attitudes in all the years that I've been working on this subject. And you have to remember, I've been involved with this since the mid-'60s, and I wrote my doctoral dissertation on the history of the controversy of it before, from 1896 to the present. I mean, well, to 73 or 74. And the point is that I have never seen the scientific community as aggressively hostile against it as in the past couple of decades. It's been amazing to me. There's no interest whatsoever. I published this book in the year 2000, except for two people, Jerry Clark and Bud Hopkins. Everybody there had a PhD or an MD who wrote the chapters. John Mack was one of them. We even had a debunker, Michael Persinger, and Don Dondery, PhD psychologist. They all wrote chapters about the UFO and abduction phenomenon. And we thought, we're aiming this at the therapeutic community to show them that there's a there. You know what I mean? That there's research, there's studies, there's thought in this, there's depth. The effect it had on the scientific and academic community was well below the range of 0. There was no effect whatsoever. 0. That was published by an academic press, University Press of Kansas, and a very good press. They instruct the government what to do. The government says, what the hell's going on with this phenomenon? It's like what Bill Clinton said when he first got into office, according to Webster Hubbell, his chief aide. Hubbell said Clinton wanted to know two things. He wanted to know if UFOs were real and who killed John Kennedy, you know. And the answer is, if we wanted to know if UFOs were real, the most important thing that has ever happened to humanity ever, he would have already, he'd already know that part. He'd be briefed immediately. He's already been elected president. This is when he walked into the White House. He was elected in November, now we're dealing with January. He would know. And the answer is he never knew. Every once in a while, a government study will come up. See, I've talked for 4.5 months about this subject to my students, so you got to wrestle me to the ground and get me to stop talking, Steve. But every once in a while, there'll be a big brouhaha over a government study. And there was one a few years back. A guy named Blum wrote a book about it. I think it was called Out There, I can't remember, or Beyond something, I don't know. Anyway, and it was just these people who were working in the Pentagon or the basement of the Pentagon. They were ex-Marines or ex-Army or whatever they were, and they started looking at sightings, and they went to Wisconsin, and they interviewed a whole bunch of people who had seen UFOs and all that. And I'm thinking to myself, huh? What do you mean, interviewing people who've seen UFOs? If there was a secret study of this phenomenon, you're starting in kindergarten. You don't start in kindergarten, you start in graduate school. You know, you're not, this is the most basic level. And they interviewed some people who were off their rockers in this book. They took at face value, and you immediately know, as soon as they say we're studying UFOs, you immediately know they don't know anything about the subject. That's not to say the study of UFOs isn't unbelievably important. It is. But they were starting of finding out whether they were real or not. That's not a government study. You know, if I have looked at, I don't know how many hybrids, maybe somewhere between 25 and 50, just in my own little research, who are being placed and so forth, or working for the program, the numbers become astronomical right away, immediately. I mean, it just can't be possible in my little Delaware, area of Philadelphia, which is right next to Delaware, which is right across from New Jersey and near Maryland. In that little corner there, I could not have discovered a nest of them. This has got to be happening all over the place. Once you ask these questions, and the answers get crazier and crazier. I'm sorry about that, but there's got to be a lot of them.
Do you think there are any hybrids that don't know they're hybrids?
No. Well, they don't think of themselves as hybrid. Now, I've had people call me up and say, I think I'm a hybrid. To me, that's automatically means they're not one. They would never use that word. That word is a foreign word. They would never think of themselves as that. They would just think of themselves as being created to live here. They're just what they are. They don't have a name for themselves. So they think of themselves as being created on this object, and now they're living here, and they're going to assimilate into the society, and everything's going to be just wonderful. So, but that's a dynamite question, and it deals with self-awareness. And the answer is that they are self-aware because they know they can control people. But hybrid is, I don't think that would come into that. I don't know if hybrid would come into it. Yes? What was that? No. The abduction phenomenon starts in infancy and goes to old age, with increasing and decreasing areas of frequency. I think that the frequency has increased for many abductees enormously in the past decades or so. You don't ask to be invited when you're an infant, and we know that babies are invited when are abducted when they're infants because their mothers and fathers are abducted with their babies or with their children. And we can follow those kids up from the time they were young until they're old. And it's not only that. My older kid once noticed something I'd never noticed. I'm doing this stuff day and night, till my brains are falling out of my ears. And he notices something. And what he notices is, he says, every time that these people come on board, the beings, whoever they are, never say hello. Nor do they ever say goodbye. And I thought, God, I never even thought of that. That's true. There's no concept of a salutation in some way like we have. There's no ending. Well, see you later. It's just all right. Next. It's their version, their world of being polite is not ours. It's a whole different world, and people do not have a choice. If people had a choice, there'd be no abduction phenomenon. Be a little tiny group of adventurers who would say, okay, take me. Most of them would have nothing to do with it. I would be one. Yes? Well, I could not... I'm going to be relatively quiet on that, but let's just put it this way. I have never seen a hybrid enter or exit any place that I know of. However, I'm going to be coy about that because that is something that did occur to me. And so far, no luck. Do we see abductees regularly? I have, well, they all drop out after a while. One I had 100 sessions with. One I had 27 sessions with. One I had 35 sessions with. And eventually they get sick and tired of it, and I don't charge any money, and they can come and go as they please, and it's their life, not mine. I could do that. I could do that at $200 an hour. If you want to give me a couple thousand, I'll be glad to do that. But it's difficult for me to go a couple hundred miles and stay overnight and drive and teach the next day. It's a tough. Nope. All you see is a guy pulling up, a guy coming into the house, and then leaving. In a car, let's just say. So it's a guy. Now, the question then is, well, if they're walking into Walmart at 3 o'clock in the morning and on 24 hours, do they have tapes of people walking into Walmart? Like the woman I'm working with and a couple of other hybrids. And I have not explored that. I'm not a member of the police department. I don't think I can go to Walmart and say, I want to see all your tapes from last night, please. I think there's been a crime committed, and here's my badge. Or whatever. I mean, I'd have to pull a ruse or something like that. I don't think that they would just go for the fact that I'm an abduction researcher. And what are you going to see? Well, Ariel's here walking into Walmart with a couple of guys. Which is why I cannot... I do have a photograph of a hybrid. I do have a photograph of one. And I can never use it. Because it might not be a hybrid for all I know, and then I get sued for everything I'm worth. which ain't much, but I don't want them to get it. And there's no difference. I have examined this photograph for hours and hours on end. And he's just some average-looking schmo. And there's just no... And he's I don't know what the percentage is. Is 99.1, 95.5? He looks human. And then within humans, there's a lot of weird-looking people. Years and years and years ago, in 1976, I was teaching, I think it was my second year at Temple. I got a call from somebody who had run away to Maryland, and they could get a quickie marriage in Maryland. They got married, and they stayed at a sleazy motel. And this guy, the guy was obviously an abductee. There's light outside, and they woke them up, and this is the night they were married. And they looked at the window, and there was this object right in the backyard, and they don't remember what happened afterwards. And it's obvious, something obviously happened. They said they walked out, and the guy who was the manager of the motel was really weird-looking, really. And he had a weird-looking dog, too. So I got in the car, and I drove to that motel. And the guy was weird-looking. He was wall-eyed. The eyes split out that way as opposed to being cross-eyed. And he had a average-looking dog, an ordinary-looking dog. But in their mind, he was an alien. He was a hybrid, whatever he was, He was just some guy who was the manager of the motel.
I would like to know, how do they have money to go to Walmart and get apartments?
Excellent question. I love it. The question is, how do they get money to do anything in this society? The answer is, sometimes they do have money and sometimes they don't have money. You go into a store, you say, I need clothes. You pick out a jacket, you pick out shoes, you pick out this, you pick out that, you put them all into a cart. You bring them to the register, the person puts them in a bag, and the person says, thank you very much, and you walk out. There's no exchange of funds. Or you get money. You ask somebody for money, maybe you just go to a bank and say, can I have some money, please? And the person just, oh, certainly, of course, because they can control us and we can't control them. So it's not hard. Now, I've asked this question. I've wondered about this. This is something that has, and I remember there was one incident. Here's another story for you. A woman who I have not talked about at all is taken to a convenience store, like a 7-Eleven. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. If you read the thread, I call her Karen Morgan in this, and this is the one who's been with me for years and years. And she's a resistor. She resists everything. She's got a brain chemistry that's very different from other people, and she always resists. So I think you're there. It's hard. Oh, there you are. Okay. The light is so bright it just blocks everything out. So she's going to teach somebody how to buy something at the counter. Now, the first thing you have to teach them in other situations on this one is, when the person at the register says, hi, how you doing? You have to respond. Like say, oh, I'm fine, I'm good. They have to teach them that. Now comes the money. That'll be $4.85. Now you have to get your money out, and you hand them the money. Then they'll take the money, and then you wait, and they'll give you change. Put the change in your pocket. Okay. So she goes to the 7-Eleven, and she's a resistor. So the guy wants to buy, what the hell was he buying? He was buying a package of chewing gum or something like that, just for the experience of buying something. So he says, he doesn't have any money with him. He has no money. But she had money in her coat. And so he reaches into her coat and he grabs the money out and he gives the money to the guy who was waiting. The guy said, $1.05 or whatever it was. You're waiting for the money. And the guy takes, does the register and stands there with his change. And the hybrid is suddenly frozen with indecision. What does he want? Why is he doing this? So he turns to the abductee and says, what do I do? She says, well, I'm not going to tell you. And he just grabs her and they walk out and leaves the guy with holding the change. And he says, you shouldn't do that. That is not good. You have to teach me, on. But he had to be taught how to use money and what money, how it worked and all the rest of that stuff. However, how they get the majority of their money, I do not know. But I do know it's easy.
David, we're going to go with one last question, and then we're going to ask to adjourn to the back, or they can talk to you where you're in the back.
Okay, will do.
What about physical evidence of abduction? Physical evidence of abduction, implants?
Well, there's a Roger Lear, who's who's a member of LA MUFON, I guess. Has done a lot of work in implants, has some very interesting results. There's more than that. I mean, implants is what comes to mind immediately, of course. With implants, you always have to show. You have to show that the composition is not Earth-like, which is a very difficult thing to do because the entire universe is made up of the same things. There's different isotopic ratios. I have no idea what that means in different things, and in Mars there's different isotopic ratios than in Earth, and maybe you can make that, but isotopic ratios can actually be changed in a laboratory setting. But with an implant, ultimately and in the long run, you're going to have to show function. You're going to have to show this device measures hormonal levels, and here's how it works. And you put it in a jar of testosterone and it does something, and you put it in a jar of estrogen and it does something else, whatever it is. And then once you have function, then you've got something that we really is unusual. And I don't know if we have that quite yet. However, you have to remember that people are abducted in groups. And when I say the word groups, all psychological theories founder, that's it for psychological theories except one, hysterical contagion, which is not a concept. We know everything there is to know about hysterical contagion. It does not work in an abduction scenario. For example, if you want to hear yet another story, I got a call from John Carpenter, who's an abduction researcher, was an abduction researcher, still is, in Springfield, Missouri. He says, David, there's a guy named George who's going to call you up because he wants to investigate a sighting that he had when he was 17 years old. He's like 40 now. I said, okay. So he calls me up, and he had this weird sighting. He was with a friend, and he was in this cemetery, and this UFO came down real close to them, and he panicked and ran away, and it's been with him ever since, and he wants to know what happened. So I said, okay, we'll take a look at it. And to me, it sounded just like a UFO sighting. It didn't necessarily have to be an abduction or anything like that. Well, it turns out that he lived in a sort of an executive executive house area that had circular streets. It was off a main street, and you went in there, and he had a friend who was a girl who lived a few doors away. It was a Friday night. They had nothing to do. She was 14 years old. And so he went over her and said, let's take a walk. And they walked down to the main drag. They walked through the highway, and then they walked up into this old cemetery. And they see this UFO coming over them. Next thing you know, they're both taken up into the UFO, and their clothes are removed. He's put on a table in one room, and she's put on a table in another room. They can sort of see. He could see her from where he was a little bit on a table. And this was done to him, and that was done to him, this was that to him. And it was just typical abduction stuff. And so that was it. When I talked with Carpenter later on, what I did not know, and what he thankfully did not tell me, is that the girl, who was now 37, had had a session with him. This event, and was able to confirm everything that he had said from her perspective, seeing him in the other room, etc., etc. Now, either they're in cahoots to fool a couple of people who nobody ever heard of or will ever hear of, me and John, and I can't say maybe I'm wrong about John, and tells a cock and bull story for what reason, or you have a little tiny two-person group. But there are 3 people who are abducted, and there are families abducted. There are strangers abducted together who also can confirm their own abductions, can confirm other people's abductions, and sometimes just are not abducted and see it. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. Once you get into that, all psychological explanations are just shattered. people are physically missing from their normal environments. They are not there. People don't find them down at the corner bar, tipping the elbow, having a cool one, and then they're coming home and telling the wife, oh man, I was on Mars, and we don't have that. There's one case in the early 1970s in Australia. Everybody points to it. Maureen Putty, the Maureen Putty case. She claimed she was being abducted while sitting next to a researcher in her car who stared at her the whole time and she never went anywhere. She wasn't an abductee. The point is, though, that we don't get that. People are physically missing from the normal environments. Police have been called. Search parties have been sent out. Children have searched for their parents. Parents have searched for their children. This is standard stuff. Not only that, but people come back with unusual marks on their bodies, scars. And when I say scars, I mean fully formed scars. That is not biologically possible. One time, here's another story. One time I do a session with this woman, and we look at a couple different things, and she had come up from Virginia, and her mother lived in near where I was, so I'd stay overnight and go back down to Virginia, a 700-mile drive. And or 7-hour drive or whatever it was. Anyway, so we do sessions, everything is fine. The next day, I go about my normal life, which is pushing a cart with my list at a supermarket. And I'm going down the aisles, my brain on neutral as usual, thinking what I'm going to eat next, and I'm going around. And there she is in front of me. I said, gosh, what are you doing here, She says, well, I called your wife to tell me, and she told me where you were, and I wanted to show you something. Okay. I was so astounded, And she said, look at this. And there's a scar running right down her wrist that wasn't there the day before. And she says, look at this. And there's another scar running right down her wrist that was not there the day before. That is the abduction phenomenon. But there's more. But wait. For 1995, I will tell you the end. The people return with their clothes disheveled. Okay, they got their clothes, they have to put them back. Sometimes they return with their clothes put on inside out. Put them on inside out. Sometimes if it's at night, they return with their nightgowns or pajamas off. They think, gee, how the heck? How did I do that? Yeah, but maybe I staggered around and took off my pajamas, and left them there. And then people return wearing other people's clothes. That's a tough one to reconcile. That's a tough one. In the mail I get once this woman she bought a Victoria's Secret nightgown, and it was the second time she wore it. She wakes up in the morning and she's wearing a T-shirt that says 13th annual, I think it was Tagora, I can't remember, marathon. This woman was not a runner, I can guarantee you that. And Tagora, this town, is 150 miles east of Tokyo. She's never been, to the best of my knowledge, she's been in Europe. She's never been in Asia. And she said she never saw her nightgown again, and she mailed me she said, you wanted the T-shirt? I said, yeah, fine, I've sent it. So she sent it to me. She had actually worked with Bud Hopkins first, so I sent it off to Bud. I went on to have a lot more sessions with her than Bud did, but the fact is that happens more often than you'd think. They just, when they get their clothes back, sometimes they get them, the bigs who bring clothes get them mixed up.